Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having an amazing day today. Today we're taking a look at the short story, The Church in High Street. It was published by Ramsey Campbell. It was one of the first things that he ever published. It's in the Cthulhu Mythos. My copy, my second copy of this actually, is in this collection called Cold Print by Ramsey Campbell that I'll link you to in the comments below in case you're interested in taking a look at it. It was my first time I read it was in the Cthulhu Mythos collection, but this is reprinting all of his Cthulhu Mythos stuff. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a deep dive into this collection and looking at each of the short stories in here, and then letting you know what I think about them. So I'm doing this in the middle of September. My goal is to start publishing these in a couple of weeks once we start hit to October. I got a few short stories by Lynn Carter left over from last October, but now I'm going to be after those 4 or 5 short stories from Lynn Carter that I recorded reviews for back then. I'm going to then head and start publishing these then. So as a reminder, I try to dedicate the 3 articles that I do for reviewing each week in the month of October to the Cthulhu Mythos. Since we look at 3 genres, horror, science fiction, and fantasy on this channel, I try to dedicate that month to Cthulhu Mythos stuff, and I also try to do about a third of the reviews outside of that month in horror, a third in science fiction, and a third in a fantasy. Right now I just finished a fantasy series from the Lone Wolf stuff. I also doing some BattleTech deep dive, which is in the science fiction side of things, and I also just did a Shirley Jackson collection, and she's a major figure in American horror. So Ramsey Campbell is a big name in the UK. He developed into a big name. For example, I had this novel of his called Midnight Sun, which I haven't reviewed yet. I knocked it out a few years ago before I started reviewing this channel. He is somebody that starts off writing horror. Eventually he's going to develop into more of a horror, bridges with the sense of awesomeness. When you're reading his works, sort of like Algernon Blackwood masters his stuff like The Willows. H.P. Lovecraft does in his later stuff as well. He weds the two feelings and sensations when you're reading his works at the same time. This is just pure horror. I'm only going to be giving this a 7- out of 10. It's just one of the first things he wrote. You can definitely tell, but it has this sort of a raw verve and energy to it that some of his later stuff doesn't have. So I definitely like it. It's been heavily reprinted in Cthulhu Mythos collections, which is where I first read it, and then I've read it a couple of times since then. So I've read it about 3 times now, and so now I'm reading it for this channel and dedicating some time. Now I've done 2 short stories by Ramsey Campbell so far. Neither of those are in the Cthulhu Mythos. One of those was a horror short story. One of those is a fantasy short story that was published in the Appendix M collection that I just did a deep dive into. Again, he's a big name because he's published a lot of novels in the UK. So he's considered more like a Stephen King or Dean Koontz, who's published a lot and is a well-known writer in the UK. But he's been around since, and this one was published in the early 60s. So there you are. And as a reminder, I try to keep my reviews spoiler-free. So I'm not going to do a review spoiler-based of this short story in case you've never heard of it before, or in case you have heard of it but you've never actually gotten a chance to read it. The Church in High Street this novel, which is about novel size, was about 16 pages long. I read it last night while I was taking my nightly bath. And then I also knocked it out in about a little more than a half an hour, like 31 or 32 minutes proper. So it was right around a half an hour. It did take me a little bit to get started with it, but I've always really liked it, and definitely a lot of fun stuff happens with it. But he's not like knocking you down any new doors or anything like that, which is why I'm giving it a 7-, like a 6.8 or a 6.9 or a 6.7 that I'm running up to, rather than a proper 7 out of 10. Again, it definitely has a verve and energy to it. There's a sincerity to this short story that I enjoy. That sits well with me, and it makes me happy to go back and read it a third time. Our point of view character is brand new to a town called Temple in the UK, which has a dark purpose and a dark church on the high street. As a reminder, the high street is basically the main street of the UK, where all the main sort of functions happen. So it's basically their term for the main street. So if you were to rewrite this as in the US, you'd probably call this the church in Main Street. But it actually happens on a church called High Street. So it's not just, you didn't call that. But again, a lot of Main Street USAs are actually called Main Street, right? So again, that's sort of what they generally mean when they use that term for my fellow Americans. But there you go. There's A Church in High Street by Ramsey Campbell, the third story that I reviewed, and the first story in the collection Cold Print, which we'll be doing a deep dive into here starting soon. And I'll start publishing this in a few weeks in my October. Head back to the Cthulhu Mythos world. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. What did you think? Would you like to talk about it further? Did you think it was better or worse than I thought it was? Would you like to talk about some of the spoilers in this short story? Let's do so. If you like this video, hey, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these stuff. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing in it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.